Hello everyone, welcome to the third year of the Clown Decade, and the second video of the year. Unfortunately, something has happened today which has just meant that as far as I'm concerned, the rule of law may as well be dead and buried in the United Kingdom. Though of course, that has been true for some time, what with Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain getting away with years of causing huge disruptions in large cities within the UK, and as I said, getting away with it for the most part. And it does seem that Tory ministers, at the very least, are saying that they are going to do something to change these laws, so that basically people who are clearly breaking the rules and being completely civilly disobedient will be punished for, well, being criminals. So, the Edward Colston statue protesters cleared of criminal damage. New laws will tackle vandalism, says Minister. Well, I do hope so. Tough new laws will tackle protesters who tear down statues, a minister has said, after 4 Black Lives Matter activists were acquitted over the toppling of the Edward Colston monument in Bristol. Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, suggested that loopholes in law were helping vandals to evade prosecution and that legislation going through Parliament may close them. And I will go through the specific laws that actually got them off the hook, because they are ridiculous. Ministers were surprised yesterday when a jury cleared 4 protesters of criminal damage for removing the statue of Colston, a 17th century slave trader, at a Black Lives Matter protest on June 7, 2020. And it wasn't just ministers who were very surprised, I think it was everyone in the United Kingdom that isn't part of the woke mob were surprised by this. In fact, even the woke mob were probably surprised by this because they think we've got fascists in charge. But as far as I'm concerned, absolutely everyone who saw the videos of that statue come down, and I've covered it plenty of times in the past, we're expecting absolutely everyone arrested for that to be put in jail at the very least. But it appears no, they just had to go to court and get acquitted. Rhian Graham, 30, Milo Ponsford, 26, and Sage Willoughby, 22, tied ropes around the bronze memorial, and Jake Scoose, 33, joined them to help roll it into Bristol Harbour. All 4 denied criminal damage and argued that the statue, which stood in the city centre for 125 years, was so offensive in the multicultural city that its existence constituted a hate crime. They were cleared at Bristol Crown Court after a 2-week trial. I just want to blow my brains out after that. Graham said today that the verdict should not be treated as licence to tear down other monuments. Yeah, literally, it's okay when I do it. That is literally what is being said here. I completely understand people's concerns, and I really don't think this is a green light for everyone to just start pulling down the statues, she said. This moment is about this statue in this city at this time. This is just a massive slap in the face to everyone who was against this. A massive slap in the face. Why is having a monument to Marx in Hyde Park Cemetery? Why is that not offensive to absolutely everyone who's had family that has been directly affected by communism? There's an Engels statue I keep going on about in Manchester. Why can't I go and tear that down because I find it incredibly offensive, especially since it's outside one of my favourite pubs? And I'm not pulling that out of nowhere, by the way. Even The Guardian published an article calling the Engels statue offensive to those who suffered under communism. How this isn't a green light to just go and tear down any monument you want is beyond me. If something is offensive, it is now fair game. Do you understand Pandora's box and why it is a bad thing to open? Asked about the verdict, Schnapps said destroying public property was unacceptable and that monuments should be removed by democratic means. That's completely fine with me. He told BBC Breakfast, "We do have a clause in the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill which will perhaps close a potential loophole and mean you can't just go around and cause vandalism, destroy the public realm, and then essentially not be prosecuted." Because that's exactly what happened. He added on Times Radio, "We'll always be on the side of law and when necessary we'll fix any loopholes in the law to make sure that it's always the case. The Police Crime, Sentencing and Court Bill increases the maximum penalty for all types of criminal damage to 10 years in prison. At present it is 3 months and a fine up to £2,500 unless the damage done exceeds £5,000. There was a riot in Bristol when the law, which also increases police powers to limit protest, was proposed in March." Yeah, there's good things and bad things in that bill, to be honest. A Home Office source said that Shapps was speaking generally about criminal damage and not about the Colston case. They said that there was a broader question of what happens when a jury ignores the directions of a judge on matters of law, but said that this was a matter for the Ministry of Justice. And I can only assume that they've added that bit in because the jury literally went against the judge's advice. In other words, it appears that we had an activist jury. And luckily we are right at the place in the article where we get the lucrative details about the case. So, the jury in Bristol, who spent less than 3 hours deliberating their verdict, which I think they're mentioning that because I don't think that's a very long time to deliberate a verdict, has been shown CCTV of Graham, Ponsford and Willoughby passing ropes to one another to place around the statue's neck and high-fiving each other when it fell, caught red-handed. An estimated £3,750 of damage was caused to the statue and £350 of damage to the railings of Perrose Bridge, where the statue was rolled into the harbour. So over £4,000 of criminal damage. So 3 months of jail time, according to the law at the time. That's what I would have been happy with. It was recovered and put on temporary display on its back in the M Shed Museum. The statue went into storage this week. Put it back up. Clean it, polish it, put it back up. Don't give them the full win. Don't let it stay down. You put it back up. Willoughby, who took the knee as he left court, literally genuflecting, said, "The verdict was a victory for racial equality, and it's a victory for anybody who wants to be on the right side of history." When asked what he would say to people who accused him of trying to rewrite history, he said, "We didn't change history, we rectified it." Yes, I'm sure all of those slaves from the Royal African Company, or whichever company he was a vice governor for or something. I'm sure all the slaves are just so happy in whatever afterlife you believe, to see that you have pulled that statue down. No, the only people happy about this are woke activists, who, quite frankly, seem to be winning a hell of a lot of battles, but then again, we are in the clown decade, and these things are only going to get worse before they get better. But at least with this verdict, quite a lot of people seem rather annoyed by it. But luckily, the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill appears to be trying to rectify any sort of loophole that allowed the 4 people to get away with their criminal damage. Though technically it's not criminal as judged by the jury, and there's nothing I can do about that. And this has, of course, annoyed the prosecution as well. The prosecution had argued that the rule of law, not the morals of the 17th century slave trader, was the question. This trial is about cold hard facts, and it is fundamentally about the rule of law, William Hagues QC said in his closing speech. If we can pull down what offends us regardless of the views of others, then what statues, institutions or buildings are next, you might ask. Classic Pandora's box argument. There were cheers from the public gallery after the verdicts were returned. It's just a completely activist city. It's why there seems to be quite a large Antifa presence in the city, and hence there were riots with the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill when that was first doing the rounds. But now, of course, we need to hear from the defence, who seem to be mentalists. So, Blinny Ní Grála, who represented Graham, said the case had demonstrated the fundamental importance of trial by jury to represent the collective sense of justice of the community. Which to me is just insane. We have rule of law, but now all of a sudden, 12 people, if they decide a law that is eminently reasonable, isn't reasonable anymore because of the values certain people had and the intention they felt was, that it was right on, it was high status. That means, no, they don't need to be punished. Ridiculous statement. In this case, they determined that a conviction for the removal of this statue that glorified a slave trader involved in the enslavement of over 84,000 black men, women and children, as a most virtuous and wise man, would not be proportionate, she said. I was on Tailed Features stream last night, and someone in the chat was saying, a leftist, of course, I think he's actually an open communist, oh, but he was a slave trader, they were making this, it was glorifying the slave trade. No, that's not why the statue's there, and it's not why a load of places are named after him in Bristol. It's because he basically made the city an infinitely better place than when he was born. He invested most of his money into the city, and even from Bristol historians' own collection of what they say and where he actually got his money from, they don't actually know how much came directly from a slave trade, because the Royal African Company was part of the Atlantic Triangle. He probably will have got actually most of his money from investments and savings rather than directly in the slave trade. It's a ridiculous thing to just say, oh, this is glorifying the slave trade. No, it's not even where we think he got most of his money from. The jury had been urged by the defence team to be on the right side of history. It's a whole feels over reals thing. Here's the law. They clearly did £4,000 worth of criminal damage. They should be put away for 3 months. Oh, but they're on the right side of history. Ridiculous. If you are ever in a jury and someone on the defendant or the prosecution side tries to appeal to you by saying be on the right side of history, be against them straight away. That is nothing but a manipulative tool, and if they're trying to use emotional manipulation to win a case, that means they don't have any good arguments. That means that they are probably in the wrong. Liam Walker QC for Willoughby said in his closing speech that the decision would be reverberated around the world, and argued that the continued existence of the Colston statue had been a racist hate crime. I mean, what a ridiculous statement. You could probably say that about the slave trade. You could probably say that was a racist hate crime. I don't think putting up a statue can be seen as a racist hate crime, especially since the statue wasn't put up in celebration of his slave trading. It celebrated the achievement of a racist masked murderer. Oh, who did he murder? Tell me who he murdered. That's a hell of a thing. That is defamation of a dead man. But luckily this seems to be the only QC I can find who is actually on the side of the defendants, given it was his job to defend them. But luckily 2 QCs on Twitter, Philip Marshall and PJ Kirby, were having a little Twitter discussion about the verdict, and it starts with an absurd verdict, but that is the verdict. But it's good to know we are all now get to pick and choose what to destroy as and when we see fit. What I've been saying, I appear to be agreeing with senior barristers. Possibly a strictly perverse decision, but I would not say absurd. To quote one of the defence counsel, Blini Ni Grale, juries represent the collective sense of justice in the community. A rare but understandable decision, in my opinion. Remember Clive Ponting decision? Similar. To which Marshall replies, I won't quibble over whether it's absurd or simply perverse. I had understood jurors still took an oath to give a true verdict according to the evidence. Perhaps we should dispense with that. So, this decision is so bad that QCs are questioning whether juries are even effective anymore. Which is a hell of a thing to state openly on Twitter, I think. But I'm completely with him. If juries are going to let obvious criminals off, for quite frankly dubious reasons, or not even dubious reasons, expressly political reasons, which I will go through in a minute, then why have them at all? Justice is supposed to be blind and rule-based and equal for everyone. Everyone should be treated equally under the law. You don't get special treatment just because you happen to agree with the opinion of the month. So, as mentioned before, this chap, Liam Walker, there's a little information on how he worked on the case on the Barrister Chambers website, and I just want to go through some important points. Also, obligatory, don't try and harass this guy in any way, I'm just passing on information to you. So from the onset of being instructed, Liam worked closely with the local community so that he could present the case for the defence powerfully. As a result of his preparation, Liam was able to call esteemed historian Professor David Olusoga, OBE, who is a consistent writer for The Guardian, and I've even gone through a couple of his articles. I mean, the 2 on screen are just a couple of examples from the past few months. Who gets to define Britishness when making TV? Not people of colour, that's for sure. And another one from August, for right-wing culture warriors to shed light on past conflicts is to insult our history. So as is quite clear, he is a bit of an activist for wokeism. And Liam Walker also worked with respected local community leader Mr. Lloyd Russell, a person who I really can't find much information on, apart from the fact he seems to be, as he said, very involved in the local community, especially the local black community in Bristol. But hey, at least these white defendants and white QC managed to get some black people to back them up, I suppose. So not only did this activist QC manage to find very good specific activists to talk about the issue of a 17th century slave trader, which would only have something to do with the case if political motivation mattered at all in the case, which it shouldn't have, but it did to the jury. And this is the same tactics that happened in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. It's more emotional manipulation and loopholes within the court system that they have tried to go through, and it appears in the UK that has been successful. Because I'm going to go through a couple of them. In addition to the unique factual aspects of the case presented by Liam, the trial involved new and complex legal arguments. I'm sure they were. Liam successfully submitted that prevention of crime could be relied upon as a defence, as the jury could consider whether the presence of the statue itself constitutes an offence under Section 5 of the Public Order Act, 1986. And just for context of what this law is, a person is guilty of an offence if he uses threatening or abusive words or behaviour or disorderly behaviour, which obviously the statue didn't do, or displays any writing, sign or other visible representation which is threatening or abusive, and that's what they were trying to get them on. Apparently having a statue of Edward Colston is abusive or threatening. And the law carries on, within hearing or sight of a person likely to be caused harassment, alarm or distress thereby. Which is just, this is how badly written some of the UK laws are, especially in the late 20th century. What does that mean? You know what can cause alarm? If you have a big sign saying warning, that can cause alarm in people's heads, or even distress. I don't see why this can't be applied to a wet floor sign. You would be alarmed by a warning, you would heighten your senses and be on the lookout for any danger. According to the letter of this law, I could make that argument. Liam also identified that the jury should consider if the statue constituted an indecent display under Section 1 of the more obscure Indecent Displays Control Act of 1981. So let's have a look at that law as well. Oh boy, this one's a biggie. If any indecent matter is publicly displayed, the person making the display and any person causing or permitting the display to be made shall be guilty of an offence. That means the whole city of Bristol was committing a crime. If that is found to be true, the whole of the city of Bristol was allowing this. Any matter which is displayed in or so as to be visible from any public place shall, for the purposes of this section, be deemed to be publicly displayed. Well, obviously. In subsection 2 above, public place, blah 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 blah. It was in a public place, that doesn't matter. Nothing in this section applies in relation to any matter, including by any person in a television broadcasting service, so TVs excluded obviously, including in the display of an art gallery or museum, displaying by or with the authority of, and visible only from within a building occupied by the Crown or any local authority, or included in any performance of a play, blah blah blah, including an exhibition of a firm. Basically, none of that applies to this, because it was in a public place. In this section, matter includes anything capable of being displayed, except that it does not include an actual human body, or any part thereof, and in determining, for this purpose of this section, whether any display matter is indecent, there shall be disregarded any part of that matter which is not exposed to view, and account may be taken of the effect of juxtaposing one thing with another. And, well, I'm not going to read any more of that law. This law doesn't actually say what indecent means. And according to Wikipedia, the only applicability of this law has ever been to do with, well, matters of a sexual nature. So, the album Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, that was unsuccessfully prosecuted, so that album cover has been allowed to be put up in shops ever since on display, and nude sculptures have been concealed from outside views after a warning about the act in 2004. They seem to be the two most notable cases of this law being put in place. It has never, ever meant... So I don't even know why this law has been brought up. Again, it just seems to be a really poorly written law. What does indecent mean? Apparently indecent can now just mean statue I don't like. That's all it means now. Again, we've got statues of communists, and we're not a communist country, and we find communism distasteful and offensive. Tear them down. Anyway, finally, in addition, following the case of DPP versus Ziga, UK SC 23, the trial is believed to be the first trial in which the jury was required to consider whether a conviction of the defendant would have been a disproportionate infringement of the defendant's rights under the Articles 9, 10 and 11 of the Human Rights Act 1998. A section I'm going to ignore because it didn't seem to play into the case too much. I mean, they were just had to consider whether this law is applicable, and since they're let off, I don't think it matters anyway. So there you go. Apparently all you need to get away with criminal damage is to do it in the name of whatever is possible with TV historians who write for The Guardian and your friendly neighbourhood activists. Because, I mean, if the decision is so bad that senior barristers are literally saying maybe juries aren't a good idea, then my god, you have made a colossal screw-up with that verdict, and unfortunately I can only describe these people as innocent. As they were found innocent by a jury of their peers. And I mean, we can see the jury system working every now and then, what with the Kyle Rittenhouse situation being the big one recently. I mean, I know that was in America, but it's under the same principle. But really, it's a lot easier to notice which judges are activists and get rid of them if they are being activist judges. Whereas if you've got an activist jury, it appears there's not a lot you can do about it. It is literally pot luck. And given the nature of the people of Bristol, who basically never vote in Tories, let alone anyone who's actually right-wing, this was probably always going to be an inevitability when it came to a trial by jury. Not a lot we can do about this immediately, but this really is showing problems with trial by jury. Juries seem to just be letting off obvious criminals all the time, seemingly because they're middle class and have the right opinions. If, say, Luton TR Man was shutting down the entirety of Luton with the Football Lads Alliance and doing it in a similar way to that of Extinction Rebellion or Insulate Britain, they'd go straight to jail, even if they had a jury, because we have a really strange zeitgeist in this country at the moment that seems to think that as long as your values are okay, you can do whatever the hell you want. And that is simply a recipe for disaster. As I say, Pandora's box has been opened. Prepare for worse cases than this. And prepare for more statues being toppled, I suppose. But anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.